Harvey Weinstein faces new sexual assault charges in Los Angeles as his trial gets underway in New York.
Fox 5 legal analyst Wendy Patrick joining us now with more on this. Wendy, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, new charges, not surprising, but what do we know about these?
Well, remember that this man has been under investigation since 2017. He actually was the man that has the dubious distinction of sparking the hashtag #MeToo movements. So between that time and today, what different jurisdictions have been doing is trying to find cases that fell within the statute of limitations. What does that mean? In most states, there is a time limit between the time you are subject to a crime, you're a victim of a crime, and the time you can file charges. If you wait too long, you can't bring them. Now, those laws have largely been changed, but in Weinstein's case, what happened in New York is they were able to find 2 women that fell within the statute, and then what did the judge allow? They also allowed 4 other women to testify, and what's that going to do for him? It's going to establish a patterns make the predator. That is basically the prosecution's case here. So as of yesterday, he faces an additional 2 charges in Los Angeles, which makes him officially a bi-coastal criminal defendant.
What are we going to see over the next few weeks as this trial begins and gets underway?
Well, in New York right now, they're trying to pick a jury. So imagine in this day and age of social media, trying to find 12 men and women who have not heard of this guy, have not heard of this case. Now, we know such things are possible, but it's even more probable that they will find people that know a little bit about it, but that convince both sides they won't allow that previous bias to basically make them they'll still be able to be impartial, because it's hard to have followed this story for the last 2 years and say, oh, I'm just going to forget all of that and judge this case on its facts. But that's what they have to take an oath to do if they're selected.
I wanted to know what makes the trial so significant, aside from the obvious.
Right.
Because it changed the cultural landscape of how we do business in this country and everything else. How do you look at this case, not just when it wraps up in New York, but also in Los Angeles moving forward?
It's the end of an era. It's a great question. It's a question that many women, remember there were 80 women that stepped forward and said they were victimized in some sense by Harvey Weinstein. This is vicarious justice for them. It makes them believe that justice delayed does not have to be justice denied, because even though they're not the ones in that courtroom speaking up, they're watching this unfold and realizing that this perpetrator has finally been brought to justice. Interestingly, in a word, the defense is consent. This distinguishes Weinstein from so many other people that have been accused. I say people because remember there were a couple of women on that list. Right. Almost, and I'll say most of those that have been accused, they either stepped down, they apologized, they addressed it in some sense. Not Harvey Weinstein. From the very beginning, he has been adamant about his innocence, that it's all been consensual, and it's that defiance that is going to characterize the defense throughout this New York trial. So you can imagine the women in Los Angeles are going to be watching that very closely.
As a lawyer, how do you prove consent or not prove consent, and it's subjective in his mind? In the way that he's lived his whole life, he probably saw it as consent, but to the rest of the world, of course that wasn't consent.
See, this is your law school training coming out, Raul. That's exactly the question, and that's exactly the challenge. You're right, it does have to be, well, reasonable belief and consent. And that is why many of these cases go to trial. That's also why a patterns make the predator kind of prosecution is so valuable, because how many times is that defense going to work? And that's one of the things I expect to see in New York. We may see it in Los Angeles. We see it every time a case like this goes public, even when it's tried in the court of public opinion. Remember, that's when the safety in numbers, all the different victims come forward. But the charges in New York, if proven, carry a maximum of life in prison. Wow. So the stakes are very high. Many people think it's not a surprise he's taking this to trial. We're going to be following it very closely. It's going to take about at least 2 weeks just to pick a jury.
All right.
Okay, Wendy Patrick, thank you. I had a question about these jurors in this day and age. You mentioned this. So do you want these people on a jury?
I know.
A story that is of such a worldwide magnitude, and you're going to find 12 people who've never even heard of it? Do you want those people in the jury?
We'll see.
Okay, Wendy Patrick, thanks again. Appreciate that.